This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I am so excited to welcome to you, our listener in our global community today, somebody who I can't believe we've never actually met, because I've known this woman's name for, it must be the best part of a decade. She is somebody that my business partner, Laura Dutton, has said is a huge confidant, and she has absolutely priding herself coming on our global podcast today because she's got so much that she wants to share. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to everybody today Sanne Wouters, who is the COO, founder and recruitment coach, the COO at Revo Data, so an actual data company. Welcome to you today. How are you?
Thank you so much. Wow, what an introduction, Leisha. Thank you for having me. I also can't believe we're finally meeting like face to face for the first time ever. Sounds
Oh,
pretty wild to me, but yeah, very, very excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm very excited. Where are you actually recording this? Where are you based?
In Belgium,
Wow.
I've lived in the UK for a long time, as you might remember, and then I lived in Amsterdam for 6 or 7 years. That's also where Revo Data is based, and I've moved back home about a year ago.
Wow. I think you might actually be our first Belgian, because we've had a few over Europe, but I think that's a first. So I'll have to go back through our archive and see. So that's great because that's going to raise our European.
There we go.
I think Europe accounts for about 15% of our listeners, so we need to grow it. So thank you. Now, there'll be plenty of people that will see us sharing each other's content on LinkedIn, etc. We are very good ambassadors for each other, but there'll be so many people who don't know who you are, and let's talk about the company that you work for as well. So give us a potted history of your career to this point.
Okay, I once was a legal student and I didn't know what to do with my life. So then I just winged it and I enrolled myself for an extra master's in Liverpool. And my
Ah,
parents went, yeah, that's great, but you're going to pay for that yourself. So when I was there, I applied for jobs. One of the jobs turned out to be rec to rec. That's how I met Laura. She was my first ever manager. And I
okay.
remember coming home after a week and saying, I'm recruiting recruiters. Do we think that's a job? Is that normal? Um, so that was really funny. Also, at the time, I had to sort of justify to my parents why, as a law student, I was going to do recruitment because it really wasn't that well known. And they all thought I was mad because I think the starting salary was 16K a year. Um, Anywho's, those were the days. I then stuck to that because I actually fell in love with recruitment, as we all do.
Yeah.
Moved to London after a while, and then from London to Amsterdam. I was part of Next Ventures, setting up the office there. Then I went slightly back to London for SGI, back to Amsterdam to set up an office there again. And then about 2.5 years ago, I changed from the recruitment industry and I joined Revo Data. Revo Data is founded by an ex-Nike director who was my client at the time and who said, why don't you come and work for us for a little bit? And that little bit has turned into 2.5 years now.
Right.
Um, Become the COO there, which I love the dynamics between having been a recruiter and now being a hiring manager and how that's so different. And at the same time, I started my own company, which is called Empowered by Sanne. And in that, I coach founders and billing managers.
Amazing. We're going to come back to all the points you made in that last paragraph
Yeah.
around switching to being sort of stakeholder as a hiring manager. I just want to understand, at what point did you flip from being rec to rec, so recruiting recruiters, to not recruiting recruiters?
Yeah. I was a rec to rec, I think, for 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And Next Ventures was one of my biggest clients. And
Okay.
they always said, when you want to come and do some real recruitment. I know, cheeky, right? I
Rude.
swear to God, if you can make it in rec to rec, you can make it in any type of recruitment.
Agreed.
Because rec to rec is by far the hardest type of recruitment. I
Oh,
stand.
but there ends the podcast, everybody. We've made the point that I want to make. I'm only joking.
Yeah.
I think I mean, joking aside at you in your introduction, I've been in the Rex Rec space now since 2002. So what's that, 23 years? And I still have friends and family who do not actually understand what I do. They're like, so why would a recruiter need a recruiter? Why would a
Yeah.
recruitment company need a recruiter? And I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, literally that, literally that.
Yeah.
I
And
do
it's,
remember I was 3 weeks in and they'd given me the choice to do perma contract. And I'd said, well, I've done perm. Can I do contract? And they went, yeah, fine. And 3 weeks in, I remember sitting in the car, driving back from a client meeting in the Netherlands, going, I think I might have done a deal. And the owner went, what do you mean? I was like, well, the client's made an offer. The candidate has said yes. Does that? And then he was like, what? And I was like, is it really this easy? Because this sounds like a walk in the park compared to rec to rec.
Mm.
So, yeah.
If only you occasionally get little moments like that in retrospect, so where you happen to have the perfect candidate and the perfect
Yeah.
client moving in. But it's so rare that that actually happens. Most of the time, you do work very, very hard. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that, and
We
I'm
could,
very
we could.
get through what we've agreed we're going to discuss today. But I'm really pleased that that was just kind of your foundation, and the fact that Rectorec, I think, gives you, I think, a very good agnostic view of best practice, which I know we're going to come on to today around what recruiters can do and should do better. But before we do that, I do just want to, you said it within your intro that you also run your own executive coaching business empowered by Sanne, and talking to founders and understanding, I guess, their mindset. And I think, one of the things that always stands out when I'm looking at your content is the sort of the emphasis around identifying future high performers and how we as leaders and founders ourselves can ensure that we are high performing. So I'm going to ask a Jake and Damien question here because I love the High Performance podcast. It's one of my favorite ones to listen to. And they always ask their guests, the first question is, what is high performance? So what is?
I think high performance is a few things. I think high performance is that balanced moment. I think there's a difference between high performance and peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
Peak performance is something a lot of recruiters know at some point in their career, and then it dwindles again, right?
Okay.
High performance, however, is where you find that balance between consistent quality input, which gets you consistent quality output. And I focus on consistent and quality because peak performance is the type in your life where you're working 80 to 100-hour weeks and you don't have a life outside of recruitment or maybe the pub, and that's about it. Whereas high performance means you found a way in which you can do that structured for the rest of your life. And you have a life outside of it. So to me, high performance is also, it has to be sustainable.
I love that. I'd love that. And I think it's a real contradiction to the very often the burnout culture and, this, you've got to be sort of pushing yourself the whole time. I think it's anybody that, does any kind of exercise or, the gym or, swimming or whatever it might be, or a sports analogy, for example, you can't possibly maintain that Olympic performance consistently. And I think that's a great definition because for me, that word sustainable it's about creating a holistic approach to what high performance really is. And that's whether you're a founder, whether you're a future founder, whether you're starting out in recruitment. I think we don't often talk about consistency enough, I think, because I think it is the small gains every single day that allow you to achieve that peak. When you're aiming for promotion, you're aiming for your best EBITDA as a founder, you're aiming to scale, whatever it might be. Those triggers are where you're building towards it, but you can't possibly do that in a marathon. It's got to be small sprints.
Yes, exactly that. So I have this very weird, let's just call it a hobby. As a girl, I really like, in Belgium speak, it's called cyclocross. And it's cycling in the mud. That's what you have to imagine.
Wow.
It's really, I don't do it. Let me be clear. I watch it. I want to have surgery. And because I had surgery for 3 weeks, I was just on the couch with my dad and it was on. And it's all I watched for 3 weeks. The fun bit of it is you have a few Brits, few people from the Netherlands, quite a lot of Belgians to do it. And then every week you'll have a Belgian championship, and that means the Dutch and the English aren't participating. The weekend after, it's the exact same group, but the Dutch and the English are participating, and we call it the World Champions. Very much fun. However, cycling in the mud, what you're doing is you're not racing against anyone else. You're racing against yourself. You can only train on it by making yourself better and your technique better. And my absolute favorite in the world is Mathieu van der Poel. And what he does is he's so out of the league. He's so much better than anyone else. But when interviewers interview him prior to the race, he's never talking about the others. And when they go, oh, do you think this one's a strong opponent today? He just goes, I've got good legs today. Let me see where they take me. And I think, and I think in recruitment, what we so often do is we're so comparing ourselves on the leaderboard with others all of the time. But also, recruitment is one of the very few industries where an owner goes, great, Lisha, you've built 200K this year. Next year, your target is 300. And it's not looking at your ability. which also can be a positive thing when you move to another agency, because suddenly you don't have that stigma of Leisha, the 200K biller, and nobody tells you what you are and there's no label attached. Maybe you bill 500,000.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we also stretch people too far, because there's a lot of people who we ask a lot of things from based on nothing,
Nothing.
literally nothing.
Yeah.
I think recruitment, those who really have it down are the ones who are racing against themselves.
I agree with you totally. And I think as someone who, has been in this race a hell of a long time, 26 years and counting, I would agree with everything that you just said there. And I think your biggest opponent is always yourself and your own mindset. And that goes for knowing what your competitors are doing. That goes within internal competition. I think it's good fun to have incentives. It's good fun. Gamification is here to stay. I get it from people starting out in their career. I don't know how valid it is for people who are more mature in their career, but I think for people starting out, I think gamification is remarkable because it plays into that competitiveness. But what you've just said there is so insightful, and I think it's something that we just sometimes need to center ourselves, that which really brings us on to, I guess, the data part of the conversation, that what are we basing our targets on? And of course, it should always be centered around the profit cost per head. It should always be around productivity per head. The economic factors, don't worry, you've not clicked onto a finance podcast by mistake, but I truly believe that empowering each individual fee earner to understand the metrics of their desk and how it operates, and what this means if you operate at this GP or this fee level, this is your cost, this is your tax, your national insurance, your phone, everything.
Yeah.
Encompassing. I think, I said before we started recording that Control-Alt-Delete, if every fee earner sat listening in recruitment was capable of understanding their own mini P&L, I think we'd have a lot less recruiters, and I think we'd have many more business and commercially minded recruiters who do a brilliant job for their client base, because they really understand the metrics of what their job's doing. But going back to the data bit, I had so many people come to me as a rec to rec because that's exactly what's happened to them. I billed 400 grand last year, and now I'm being told I've got to bill 550. I'm like, based on what? And they're like, the percentage growth. And I'm like, where's that business coming from? If you did 400K in what was quite a challenging market, and they're just like, don't know. Raising my fees.
Yeah, but that's a super interesting thing you say there, because in recruitment, obviously, I work for a data company, so I'm very data driven. I love data, and we'll dive into that. However, fees and raising fees. One of my things that I coach on is USPs. And I always say transparency is not a USP, because nobody ever says, well, I'm a real shady recruiter. But also,
so I'm the slim shady. Let's start wrapping.
But also, nobody's a real transparent recruiter. There is no recruiter that says, dear Mr. Client, my fee is 25% because it is 2% for ads, 3% for in-mails, 5% for effort, and I don't know, 15% for the business, of which 5% is profit, and actually 10% is for all the others who aren't really billing. But, it's a bit of roulette recruitment. And they might bill or they might not, but that's what you are paying for, Mr. Client. Nobody does that. No. And also no business, as much as I know there's the idea of businesses that say, let us share with you what your desk cost is.
Yeah.
To this day, and I hope there are businesses out there, but to this day, I've not met a business owner that actually says, Leisha, welcome in the business. So the reason you're charging is because you cost us this. Yep. There is that. And then actually openly tell you, and we'd like to make 30% profits.
Yep.
And I'm a bit like, but why aren't you openly saying that?
Why is it all? I don't understand that. And to me, it's like you want recruiters to, as founders and as leaders, you want your recruiters to think more commercially for the clients and add more value. But if they're not allowing them to do that, I mean, there are still recruitment companies out there that do not reveal the margins that they've agreed on framework agreements, for example. And I'm like, why are you not revealing that? Even if it's a delivery model, which there is still a real argument and case in certain circumstances, particularly around public sector recruitment. And these guys, they contribute enormously to the economy and to the recruitment industry. But I will interview, a senior recruiter in there, and they haven't got a clue. And I'm like, why the clue? So I think it works both ways.
Yes, I agree.
And I think it's an interesting one because then let's open up the data conversation. I said to you before we started recording, my prediction is, as well as all the evolution that's happening with AI and automation and the seamless administrative side of recruitment is being, taken off us. I think recruitment agencies will, in 5 years' time, have either fractional or employed data professionals, data officers employed to analyze their data.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on my prediction?
I think it will happen. I think it will happen too late. I think, first of all, I think right now a lot of founders and or business owners are not aware of the data problem they already have. And what I mean with that is that I'm pretty sure, and here comes a bold statement. I love a few bold statements. I'm pretty sure that 90% of recruitment databases are built on data that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. Secondly, it
And
also
when you say data that shouldn't have, do you mean crap data, i.e. it's not valid?
I mean, yes, absolutely. Crap data, it's not valid, but also personal information that they've obtained through ways that isn't maybe completely legal.
Okay.
Because technically, there's this thing where it says, okay, Alicia Holmes, I can find your email address on the internet.
Yep.
Surely I'm allowed to have it. No, you're not.
Right.
You're allowed to write you a personalized email, but you're not allowed to put your email address, put it in bullhorn, and then send a generic mail shots because you've never subscribed to the mail shots. Right. So, but crap data is also really, really a big thing. And the amount of recruitment businesses that I know that say, oh, we have this dilemma to delete the entire database and to start from scratch and to do it all different, to do it properly this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's the same as with your LinkedIn network, Leisha. I currently have close to 10,000 connections, and I don't think I actually know 2,000 of them. But
Yeah.
it's classic, let's add all the people who have something
Yeah.
in our industry. And it's such an irrelevant network to have.
Yeah. So you start to data cleanse it. I do it. I do it across all my social media. It's very rewarding when you start unfollowing
It
people.
is.
I mean,
It is.
you secretly unfollow. You don't need to unfriend people on Facebook, by the way, guys. You can just unfollow, and you can do that on LinkedIn. But I think it should be part of your weekly KPIs to remove irrelevant connections. And if you feel like it's somebody you actually know on a personal level, because we all have friends, right, who have random jobs, we tell them in advance this is why we're doing it. I mean, I'm reaching the near 30,000 max, so I'm going to have to start being brutal with.
Yeah.
And I actually don't add anybody that now I haven't done for
If
about.
you haven't liked or commented on Leisha's recent
Well,
post,
well,
you're
yeah,
a
no,
guy.
not so much that is that if you're not in recruitment, I'm just not going to
Yeah,
add you.
yeah, yeah.
I think
Fair
what
enough.
you've said there is that I think there's going to be a lot of people, myself included, who are going to feel a sense of, I don't want to say shame because this is not about promoting shame, but I am very consciously aware that the data that is included in my, it's, I don't know, 8 years old. It's had plenty of reinvigorations, obviously GDPR compliant, and then it's gone AI auto. It's a very good system, but it's only as good as the data you put on it, right?
There
This
you go.
thing. So I think, and I really wanted to bring this up with you because then segueing nicely into the fact that you are a hiring manager, we need to make sure that we can control that as recruiters, the data that's going in, so that we're not just sending the e-shot, that the example you just gave. I don't just want to send you an e-shot because you're on my database and it happens to be something that I've taken off your LinkedIn. I mean, it's it's out,
Yeah.
like out there. So what would you say is the ideal flow for data for anyone now listening right now that presumably you're already in recruitment? What should be our starting point now then?
Yeah, I think our starting point should be first define a system. And obviously, within a lot of businesses, they've already got an idea about tagging and the flow and whatever. But if you're starting new, figure out your system. How are you going to, let's say we begin with a niche. I love niche recruitment, big fan of it. But how are you going to find candidates, whether that is location, whether that is specific technology within a technology, a level of seniority? It can be all of these things. How are you going to find them again? And I think that is something we don't think about because we very often type a lot of things in notes.
Yeah.
And then it's about, oh yeah, I do know that one contractor, he lives somewhere up Leeds and he does, how are you going to find him without his name? Think
Yeah.
about a system first. But then also, if I were to start from scratch again, I would never mail shots because the way email systems work currently, it's just not going to end well for the credibility of your email verification status. But also, a generic email is just crap.
Mm.
I'm the recipient of generic emails all week long, and it is really utterly crap.
Yeah.
And who sent me an actual tailored message or a video or a voice note or anything that says I am talking to you as a human being, they
Right.
just stand out. It's really easy, actually.
It's really interesting that you say that actually, because one of the other KPIs, this is me as a person, not just as a business person, is to unsubscribe to things. And it's usually
I
shopping
do
related,
that too. Yeah.
e-commerce related. But, you know, it could be a client that started sending out e-shots, and I do occasionally get them, which I always find a bit like, you know, why are you e-shotting me? I'm not your client, it's the other way around. But I think we're falling out that curve now. And in fact, if you are listening to this now, a few weeks ago, if you click on my profile, you'll see that I did a live with Kieran Mayers from Pager. He's our sponsor for the podcast. And one of the things we talk about was e-sequencing and the e-shots. And I just said, when was the last time you bought something or you engaged
Yeah.
with a service because of a generic e-shot? We know they're generic. When was the last time? And hand on heart, never. So in the same way that I controversially, very controversially for Laura, who I know is a huge advocate of the sort of picking up the phone, the cold calling, I'm the other way around. I think we should all be on the phone, but not cold calling. I think when was the last time you picked up, somebody rang you cold, didn't know who's this number, and don't know who it is. Oh yes, I'd like to buy it, please. So I think I agree with what you said there.
But what you said, and that's one of the things, again, it sounds like an advertisement. I don't mean that way. I coach on, but cold calling, this is one of my little pet projects, I'll say. The problem with cold calling and cold BD is that we all have it in our minds that for some reason, the perfect BD call is you're on my list, you magically ended up there, right? And I call you and I do a fantastic pitch.
Yeah.
And for some reason, you're going to say, Hi, Sanne, thank you for calling me. You're a complete stranger, but you know what? I'm going to trust your business. I'm going to trust my business with you. Here are 5 exclusive roles. Let me put you on the PSL now, and your fee's not a problem. For some reason, that's what we expect as the perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So I completely disagree with that. And a lot of people find it really, really hard because I do a session on it, psychologically, your brain fight or flight, right? Everything that is not that response, we see as rejection.
Absolutely.
Our brains hate rejection,
Yeah.
which also means that we don't like to do BD and cold calling because we know we're going to get rejected and we want to go and make that coffee, send mum a text.
We want to
Right?
speak to somebody we know likes us.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So
It's true.
I have this little system and I call it the worst week of your life. And quite a
Okay.
lot goes into it. But basically what it boils down to is we make sure you have a list of 100 managers who are active in your market and who hire what you're placing more than 5 times a year. If they don't do that, they should never be on your list, right? And I've created a system called Worst Week of Your Life. And during that week, all you're ever going to do, we create a pitch that is really unique and it has actual USPs, because if the opposite isn't true, it can't be a USP. So transparent, honesty, all aren't USPs, because nobody says I'm a shady recruiter and
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't deliver quality. Nobody says that, right?
No.
It's got to be true and it's got to be unique and it's got to be a choice. And then all we do for a week is call those 100 people and we simply say, I exist. And
Yeah.
these are the reasons people work with me. I really don't expect you to do any business with me right now because I am a stranger, but know I exist.
Yeah.
And from there, I've got 7-step system to start building that relationship so that as a recruiter, if you keep doing the same market, there's only 1 week in your life that you have to call strangers.
Love it. I love that. The whole
Right?
premise of that, I'm almost like pausing, going, wow, that's really refreshing, because you're absolutely right. And what is actually the worst that can happen during that worst week of your life? You might actually have some really nice conversations.
Yeah.
You've got to start somewhere. And I
And
think,
you're not trying to sell anything because
uh,
you're saying I don't expect you to buy anything from me. I just want to let you know I exist.
and actually, somebody asked me on LinkedIn this morning around, she's a CEO, she's a very successful CEO, and I can't remember what she was commenting on, but her question on this post to me back was, what would you say to people who are really finding it challenging in their market at the moment? I'm like, when was the last time you picked up the phone to a client that you've historically had a great relationship with, but maybe they've not recruited for the last 12 months, and you've just picked up the phone and said, how are you? What's
Yeah.
happening in your business right now? What are your pain points? With no purpose of getting vacancies on, not trying to pitch vacancies. Literally, I just thought of you and I just wanted to say hello and I'm here if you need me for anything, if you want any insights, if you would like to see some data on what is happening on the flow of talent at the moment, where we can look at diverse talent pools for you, etc., etc. And then you can also use that as a business development tool, which I think we never talk about that in context of candidates. But if you're in a candidate short market or where the flow of candidates restricted, you can do the same thing where you're already, that's where having a populated database, I think, is much more important to have phone numbers on there.
Yeah.
And
email addresses.
when was the last time I spoke to you? That candidate is more likely to respond to, oh, Alicia's calling, I've not spoken to her for a while, to an e-shot that's like, hi, everyone, how's everything going? It's just...
In Dutch, there is this saying, and it's called I need to rub closer together with someone, or rubbing closer together. And what that means is that the people you spend time with are the people that you will do business with. Yeah. Because people buy things from people they know and like. And I know it's a fact, Lisha. You and I, we get on. I think that's safe to say. Yeah. If I wanted to call you, let's say every other week, and if I were to drop you a genuine WhatsApp, the weeks in between, and that's, I think, the key thing. It needs to be genuine. Yeah. You can't automate this away. It needs to be a genuine. Maybe use Laura as an example. I have known Laura for a very long time. We both have dogs. We speak a lot about dogs, right? Her cat's recently gone to the vet, and I genuinely want to know how her cat is. Yeah. But Laura and I, we do business together. She recommends me to her clients. I recommend her to managers I work with who need hiring because I really like her. I think she likes me. And we genuinely spend time together.
Mutually beneficial. And actually, I thought, oh God, I knew I should have saved it. It's something like you're more likely to have a client that becomes a friend than a friend that becomes a client. I did it. That's a miracle. And it's so true. And I was just like, it's totally true. And I think you go through, if you are listening to this now, and this is not a condescending statement, and you really do want to have an enduring recruitment career and you see your future in the recruitment industry as it evolves, having a personal connection, and that doesn't mean that you're looking the same, you sound the same, you've got the same background, but actually you find commonality. That's our psychology as humans. It's not having necessarily a target on that person. Oh, well, I need to ring Sanne because she's going to refer three managers. It's because they want to. And I think it's seeing that bigger picture. And, we started the conversation about high performance. To me, those high performers, of which, I consider myself to be a high performer within the Rec to Rec space, is because I am truly authentic in the reason why I'm speaking to people. I'm interested in people. I like connecting people. And I think that it doesn't matter whether you're recruiting, design engineers, space scientists, recruiters, data analysts, whatever your niche is, it's genuinely thinking about it. I want to go on this journey with you through your career.
Yeah. I do have a funny story about that because so I've recruited data after Rec to Rec, and for 1 week in my life, I recruited .NET. And I remember candidate had an interview, or call him, and I go, hey, how did the interview go? And he goes, good. No, right? I said, so what did they ask? And the guy goes, questions. Okay, what kind of questions? Right? Trying to be upbeat, my cheery personality. And he goes, technical. And that's the moment I decided .NET is not for me.
Not for me.
It's not my market. I can't. It's not. I just can't. Whereas data people, there's a lot we talk about. I saw a data documentary on BBC back in the day about how data's everywhere, right? I remember the example. Traffic lights are now becoming smart traffic lights. They can estimate the amount of traffic, whether they need to go green quicker, or it's all data. These are tangible things I can talk about that I find genuinely interested and I can build a report about. So be interested in your market and life becomes a lot easier.
I could not agree. I'm genuinely really interested in data. And the example I use is watching, because I love football. And when you watch a football match, I love it when they show the stats of who's had more possession, who's more likely to score the next goal. I'm just like, I love that data is everywhere. It's all around us. Even on your phone, the shame of how
your screen time. Yes. But on
Um,
that, I think that might be an interesting one about spotting talent. Ajax, I think I can say this. Ajax is a Databricks user, RevoData is a Databricks partner, so we obviously speak with Ajax. One of the things they've in-house developed, and I think that is absolutely wicked, is they've checked everyone who's ever been really, really, great at Ajax. They checked for talents and, run times and whatnot. And they now have the scouts like this. This is the mold of the kind of person that will do really, really well at Ajax.
okay.
It still happens that some scouts then go, oh, yeah, but I just feel it in my belly. This person's going to be good. And then they aren't, and they compare it with the data. But the fun thing about that is also they have a profile for every player. And based on literally the position of each player, the data analysts can come in on a Monday and they can safely say whether they've won or lost the game.
Wow.
Because they will go, well, that striker, if he was there, he was so far out of the goal, that means he should have kicked with left and he kicked with right, and God knows what, he will not have scored.
Yeah, I love that.
And I'm not saying, you could argue that in basketball, for example, there is this great, you can Google it, but there's this great image that says shots taken before they started working with data, and it's all over the place. And
Yeah.
then positions shots taken after, and there's only a few places around the field where you actually most likely score. And you could say you take out the game element, the fun element of it, but you could also say you take out the gamble element.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think I might have seen that,
It's
I've,
a very famous image, yeah. But I
yeah.
think recruitment, to make that sort of leap there to what you also already hinted on, is we very often we don't have this mold of what a great recruiter looks like. We don't actually look at the data. We still go with gut feeling. And we very often go with, and I'm sure you've had this a million times with them, they are, it goes both ways, right? They have very rich parents. So that means they're going to want to have to do well because they want to make money on their own, right? And then when the person gets sacked as well, he had very rich parents. So he never knew what it was like to make money, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Both are gut feeling,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
they're just
totally.
made up.
Totally made up. And that's where I think going back to, understanding behaviors and giving examples of where you've on demonstrating those behaviors is much more important than, oh, I really like that person because X, Y, and Z. I totally agree with you. Before we finish, I want to really get into your brain as a hiring manager. We're all recruiters listening, I would say, on the whole, mostly recruiters that listen to this podcast. What are the three, if maybe more, but three ideally top tips of what we can do better for you as a hiring manager, as recruiters?
Yeah. Figure out your actual USPs. I think that is the, maybe I should have started with three, but let's, in just random order, figure out your actual USPs.
Okay.
Anything that is, I'm a niche recruiter, I have a large network. You're all saying the exact same
Same
thing.
thing.
Stop saying it. Show some personality and tell me why exactly you are different. Because everyone's promising me they're going to fix my problem.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
why are you going to? So actually thinking of your USPs, I think that's
Okay.
a really, really big thing. The second thing is we all know that what we do is we say to a client, great, 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 I can fill this vacancy. Absolutely. We then take the spec and then we start managing expectations. Stop doing it so bloody obviously.
Yeah.
But also managing expectations is really annoying when you're on the other end, because I've just signed terms with you because you've promised me you can fix my problem. And a great example is RevoData. We always hire people with data engineering experience who, when we hire through agencies, they must be Dutch speaking, which I think is not very weird considering the Netherlands.
Yep.
And we ask for Databricks experience because that's all we do.
Yep.
And he goes, yeah, we can do that. And then we've got salary bandings, Alicia, and I personally verify the bandings twice a year with loads of data sources, and they're good, right?
Okay.
And then we take the spec, and then it begins, yeah, but would you say no to an English-speaking candidate? And the first thing that does to me is go,
You've not listened.
yeah, but also you must be kidding me. And I know you're trying to manage my expectations. Or they go, well, instead of this amount of experience, because we ask, it's a technical thing, but we ask for having brought pipelines to production. They go, would it be okay if? And I'm like, no, I'm going to pay you quite a lot of money.
Yep.
Find this. And I think that's the third thing. I've listened to this Paul Jarvis book called Company of One. And it doesn't matter if you want to start up on your own, because I actually think it's also super relevant for agency recruiters because you are a company of one in a big way,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
And he focuses on something you've already touched upon, is that retention of existing clients is much better and will much more profitable than having to go and find new clients.
exactly.
One thing he also focuses on is extreme quality. And what I mean with that is be better, do better. Don't send me the candidates who are on page one of open to new opportunities and who I've seen 4 times already and who are really not what I'm looking for. Be better. I don't think that when your candidate walks out of my interview, I should be the one to tell you that the business he's previously worked in is actually not this mega conglomerate you think it is, but it is mummy's and daddy's business, which is fine because he wants to
Yeah.
run away from it or whatever. But I don't think I should be the one telling you.
No, no,
I
definitely.
also don't think I should be the one telling you that you've had the salary wrong or that you didn't know what his current lease car was and that they actually need a bigger car because there's a baby on the way. Or I don't think I should be telling you. And very, very, very often, I'm still the one telling agencies things.
So there's a lack of validation, a lack of not even just curiosity, but just understanding the
I think there's also rather than lack of, I think there's a real pressure on recruiters currently to send out as much product as possible,
right.
which takes away. I know a pre-screen, we always go, oh, it's about an hour. No, it's not true. A pre-screen is 3 different calls that each last an hour. And if possible, it's also a lunch or a coffee, whether it's virtual or face-to-face,
Yeah.
before you really, really know a candidate. Right now, we just screen and I go, okay, Alicia, what job do you have? What job do you want to have? How much money do you want to make? And
Yeah.
then I put that up and I send that to a client.
Right.
That's not what recruitment
Not
is.
enough. No, I agree. I totally agree with you. I don't think that's changed, and I don't think that's unique to any particular market. But I think, like you say, there's so much pressure, and especially having gone through the trading conditions that we've gone through, I think even more so. There's this kind of premise around quantity again. And yes,
Yeah.
the magic happens in the interview. However, going back to the quality and the consultative approach to being a good recruiter and a good trusted networker for your client, you need to know this information. And it's very often, sometimes there might be a nuance that you don't know, but you go and ask that. But
Right.
I always set the store like when I speak to anybody as a first call, this is just the first call. This is just
Yes.
the first call. I want you to go
Of
in,
many.
said, go and think, let reflection happen, let them go and do research,
Yeah.
because when you're presenting that person to your client, to you as the hiring manager or the founder, whoever, you can give this much more in-depth
Yeah.
character, very valid, examples, and understanding whatever the technical capability is, but actually seeing it more as a holistic
Yeah.
approach.
If you as a recruiter aren't sure how the interview's gonna go, you shouldn't set it up.
No, yeah,
Bit
so
like
people wing
dating.
it, don't
Yeah, and it's a bit like dating, right? When you introduce someone to your friend and you say, "Oh, you two should really go out," it's because you inherently know those two people and you know so much about them that you think they're gonna hit it off. You don't just say, "Oh, here's a stranger I met yesterday in the supermarket and I
they?
think it's gonna be cool for you."
Yeah. I have to say, I've only occasionally ever set friends up, and I've done it 2 or 3 times, and it's ended really badly. So that's one thing that I know I must never do. So I don't know why I get recruitment right, but I don't get dating right. Oh my gosh, this has been, I mean, there's so much content in this one podcast. I think Lily is going to have a field day getting all the clips off it. We want people to reach out to you, particularly on the Empowering by Sana. We'll make sure the links are there with, I presume there's a Calendly link or something like that. Have you enjoyed being on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast?
I have. And I also love that it's such a spontaneous
Yeah.
conversation.
If
Uh,
if you're listening to this
fun.
and you've not listened to previous seasons, you'll notice that during this season 5 and beyond, we will be doing this. I don't really prep. I just kind of say, "Come on the show, let's chat." And I
Yeah.
just hope we'd like some feedback actually from you and our audience. You can either comment on this post or you can send me a private message or to the production team. What do you think about the fact that this is totally unscripted and unprepared? I think it's much more natural, more likely to come up with random memes. Thank you so much, Sanne. You have been, I knew you'd be amazing. And I'm so excited to finally meet you in person in July. We're doing the next live event on the 3rd of July in London. We've got 8 panel guests. I'm so excited. You should hopefully, if you're listening to this, you'd have started to see us sharing all the biographies of all the amazing panels. But Sana will be there in the audience, I hope. We'll get
I will be.
Not
Promise.
Ted the dog, though.
No, but I will be there. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment